So what's the most effective way to take a jazz standard like All the Things You Are? And transpose it into an entirely different key without even having to think about it. Let's talk about 4 steps to instantly transposing jazz standards. Now, having the skill to play songs in different keys comes in handy in a few different ways. For example, if you're playing with a vocalist, they're probably not singing it in the original key that you learned it. But probably the most helpful thing about having this skill is that it's going to help you in every area of your musicality. It helps with ear training. It helps with understanding harmony better. Ultimately, it will help you become a more natural improviser. So the end goal, of course, is to get to instantaneous transposition. So you get up to a jam session or somewhere and someone calls a song in a different key than you're used to playing it, that you'll be able to do that immediately. But before we're able to do that, we have to set the groundwork a little bit. So in comes step number 1. And step number 1 is to learn the melody by ear in the original key. Now, if you want to have any chance of transposing jazz standards instantaneously, you have to know the melody forwards, inside, and out. You have to know the melody so well that it's really just a complete part of you and super easy for you to play on your instrument. You can hear it up here, and you can feel it down there. So the first thing that you're gonna do is you're going to go to a place like Spotify or even YouTube, type in All the Things You Are, and look at all of the different versions of All the Things You Are that exist. You're gonna create a playlist. You're gonna start listening to this song night and day so that first you can hear that jazz standard incredibly well, you can totally sing the melody, and then finally you'll transfer it to your instrument. And the first 8 bars of All the Things You Are sound like this. I know that because I've played this so many times and practiced it along with a recording to make sure that it was exactly perfect. Now, by the way, I do have actually a step-by-step process for doing this by ear, especially if you've never learned anything by ear before. It's in my guide called Learn Jazz Standards the Smart Way, completely free. I'll leave it in the description down below. After you've got the melody down really well, it's time to move on to step number 2. And step number 2 is to memorize and understand the chord progressions in the original key. Now there's a couple levels to this, so make sure you're paying attention. Now, same as you did before, you're gonna go back onto Spotify and you're going to listen to as many versions of this song as possible, but focusing mostly on listening to the sounds of the chords. Now, this is incredibly important because when we talk about instantaneous transposition, it really doesn't have a lot to do with analytically thinking. Ultimately, in order to do it instantaneously, you have to be able to hear the chord progression in your head. And even if you're a little bit newer to jazz standards and don't really know what the chord progressions sound like so much, you have to start somewhere and get used to the sounds of the chords. So these are the chords of All the Things You Are, and it's completely fine to look at a chord chart like this. The most important thing though is of course to memorize it, because you're definitely not gonna be able to transpose anything instantaneously if you're really just relying on reading sheet music in the first place. Now the second part to this is understanding the chord progressions, and I cannot emphasize more the importance of this, because ultimately if you can hear the chord progressions but you can't actually put names to what's actually happening, it's going to be very difficult for you to get to the point you want to. So as you can see underneath here, we have Roman numerals for each one of these chords. So for F minor 7, it's actually the 6th chord, B flat minor 7 and E flat 7 are the 5 chords, arriving at the 1 chord, which is A flat major, okay? And then we have a D flat major, which is the 4 chord of A flat major, and then a 5 chord that goes into C major, a 1 chord. So the first step is, yes, you do have to understand how Roman numerals work and how we build chord progressions, which I've covered in other videos, and I won't be doing that today. But once you've figured out what the function of each chord in the progression actually is, you have to go a step further if you want to get good at transposing things quickly. And so the next step is to start categorizing the chords. So color-coded in blue here, I have the key of A flat major, which by the way, is what the key of the song is in, the original key. And then in green, I have the key of C major, because in All the Things You Are, C major is completely not in the parent key at all. In fact, All the Things You Are goes on to go through 5 total different keys throughout the period of the song. So if you want to get good at transposing, you have to start categorizing things. So the first thing we know is that we go through 2 different key centers, A flat major and C major 7. So the only question in between is, how do we get to each one? Well, we know that we start the song on F minor 7. That's the 6th chord. So we can always know that the first chord of All the Things You Are, no matter what key we're playing it in, is going to be the 6th chord. So if we know the key we're trying to play it in, all we have to know is what the 6th chord in relation to that is. We'll go over that in just 1 second. So then we want to do something really important here in understanding how the chords work. We want to be associating the melody to each chord. So, okay, that's F minor 7, and something I want you to be aware of is that the first note of the melody, or at least the note that we land on, is the 3rd, okay? Keep that in mind, because we're gonna talk about that a little bit in the next step. So, okay, now that's the note over B flat, and keep in mind, if you're a horn player, saxophone, or trumpet, doesn't matter that you can't play chords along with this, you can always arpeggiate the chords. That's totally fine too. Okay, then E flat, and that's A flat. Then we have D flat major, that's G7, and that's C major 7. Really important that you're able to relate the melody to the chords, because that's really marrying these 2 things together that you need to be hearing in your head. Again, to emphasize again, this is more about hearing for instantaneous transposition than it is about actually analyzing it like we're doing now. This is kind of just the homework we need to do to get started. So now that we've done that, let's move on to step number 3, which is actually transposing the song into a different key. So for example, let's decide that we want to play this song in the key of F major. What information do we already have that will help us play this song in F major? Well, first of all, we know that the first chord is the 6th chord. So we have to think to ourselves, what is the 6th chord of F major? Well, the 6th chord of F major is actually D minor 7. So let's cross off this F minor 7, and on top of it, put a D minor 7. And please understand that yes, we are writing this down and going through this very analytically, but this is just so we can understand what we're doing. You're not actually thinking about this when you're transposing instantaneously. Now we remember that, of course, the key is in F major, so let's skip ahead a little bit and go F major 7. Now, of course, if we looked at our Roman numeral analysis, we have a 2-5, right, which is the most common chord progression in jazz. So what's a 2-5-1 in F major? That is G minor 7, and that is C7. So again, we want to relate the melody to the chords. So we know that the first note that we land on is the 3rd, so we know that in this case, it is going to be F natural. Okay, so G minor to D7 to F major 7. I'm really letting my ear lead me here, which is something that you need to continually exercise. Moving on, we know that this chord is the 4 chord in the key of A flat major originally. So what's the 4 chord in F major? Well, that's going to be B flat major. Now the most tricky part to transpose on the fly with All the Things You Are is going to be this next section that is originally in C major, right? So there's a couple things you could do with this, right? You could just go that the original key is A flat major, and a minor 3rd down from that is the key we're playing now, which is F major. So a minor 3rd down from C major would be A major. Or another creative way you could have thought about it originally was that if the key center is A flat major to start with, the major 3rd is C major, the key center that we are going to. Basically creating these little footnotes in your head when you're originally learning the song is going to help you get there. And then it makes it easy because we're just figuring out what the 5 chord of A major is, and that is in fact E7. So in totality we have So obviously this was not instantaneous, but this is our starting point. So the next thing we're gonna do is just think, what's another key that we can play? Well, let's just pick a random key right now. Let's just say that we're gonna play this song in the key of B flat major. So again, as quickly as I can, we're going to the 6th chord, which is G minor, to a C, to F, to B flat major, to E flat major, to A7, to D major 7. So this leads me to step number 4, which is continue to learn more jazz standards and continue to transpose them. At least transpose them into one different key every time you learn a new jazz standard. So the more jazz standards you learn, the more chord progressions you will recognize and hear. The more melodies you will learn by ear and be able to transfer onto your instrument quicker. The more keys you will naturally explore because jazz standards are in all different kinds of keys in the first place. And of course, the more you exercise your transposing muscle so that this just becomes automatic. Your ear and your muscle memory work together. Now, a note on transposing into all 12 keys. Transposing into all 12 keys is a really good idea. Ultimately, if you really want to get better at playing instantaneous transposition faster, then that's a good thing to do always. But at least transferring a jazz standard into one other key is going to be beneficial for the start. So keep up this practice and you will get faster and better at doing this as you go along. But you may wonder, what are some other jazz standards to learn and to start transposing? So on the screen right now, I have a video called 10 must-know jazz standards for jam sessions. You're gonna wanna know these and go ahead and see how many of them you actually know already right here on the screen. Remember, don't forget to get my free Learn Jazz Standards the Smart Way guide at the link down below. Like this video if you got value from it. Please subscribe to the channel if you've never done that before, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.